Happy New Year, everyone. It is 2026, first BRAP of the year. Didn't have our BRAP this Wednesday because I had a scheduling conflict, but sorry for the late start here. Got late setting up, actually watching was actually playing a little bit of Red Dead Redemption 2, and then the semifinal college football playoff games on right now. University of Indiana versus University of Oregon right now. So yeah, watching a little bit of that. So, but Lodge will be joining us here in just a bit. But want to thank everyone for joining us again. Not our regular scheduled BRAP. We usually go live Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern time. But again, due to schedule conflict, had to move the show to Friday. But we'll be back at a regular scheduled time slot at 9 p.m. next Wednesday. But welcome everyone. See some familiar faces in the live chat. The Gaming Ledger, Dark Ozone, what's going on? I'm going to do me a quick favor. I'm going to drop the link here in the live chat. Let everyone know we're live. Share the link on your favorite social media platform, and we're going to get to some gaming discussion today. 2026. I seem like every year, right? Every year, every new year that comes, we are always. I always see the chatter, at least on social medias. This is going to be the year of Xbox. So, 2026. Is this the year of Xbox? We're going to talk about that in a bit. We got some Steam machine pricing, some news around that, and we're going to discuss the RAM shortage issues and the increased price of RAM right now. RAM is not cheap. It's gone up in price. We'll talk about that and some other conversations as well. Probably talk about exclusivity again. People tend to be people are definitely beating this narrative on social media about exclusives don't matter. It's kind of interesting, ironically enough. It's the thing that probably got them into their ecosystem many years ago, and they probably have stayed for those things. And because one company has shifted its strategy, all of a sudden the whole industry is shifting that strategy, and those things no longer matter. So I know I've talked quite a bit about exclusivity, I should say, in the important role they play in terms of product differentiation in the marketplace and the brand identity they create for platforms. Even that kind of return of ROI for people who go out and spend $500 and they want games that play the best, look the best. Typically, you're going to get those from the first party games. So they still serve a function. Again, not everyone's going to buy those games or buy into platforms for exclusivity, but they certainly do play in an important role. And and it should be, oh my gosh, sorry, watching this video right now. I'm kind of laughing, but I'm not going to even comment what it is because it's might lead to a political conversation, which I don't want to get into. All right, so Logic should be joining us here in just a bit. I don't have his oh, here we go. I actually do have it up. I have his blog up. We're going to discuss what are the blog posts that Logic put up. Cheap RAM was the anomaly, not the rule. We're going to talk about that here in just a bit as well. I'll wait for Logic to join before we get into that. Hopefully everyone had a great holidays. Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, Logic is here now. Get Logic here in the chat, or not in the chat, but on stage. Bring him out on stage here. Oh, Logic, we have Satya Nadella in the house. What's going on, Logic?
Not much, man. How are you tonight?
I'm good. Got a little bit of delayed start setting up. I was actually playing some Red Dead Redemption 2 and on PC, and then forgot that Oregon is playing University of Indiana, so started watching that a little bit, and I was like, oh, I gotta set up. So I lost track of time a little bit of time. So yeah, man, it's great to be back on BRAP, man. And Logic, I gotta say, playing Red Dead Redemption 2, I remember when I told you I was playing Red Dead Redemption 1. I think you said, did you say it was a GTA clone, or I don't know if you said it was a clone, but I think you said it was like GTA in the West.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. It really is. And I'm actually glad. No, I did. I played I played Red Dead Redemption when it first came out back in what was that, 2010? Is that right? 2010, 2011? I want to say it's 2010. And then played Red Dead 2 when it came out 8 years later. And so just beat, I was playing Red Dead over the holidays, beat that again. Um, I don't know. Should we share spoilers? Like, is that okay if the game's 15 years old? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Have you beaten Red Dead, the first one?
No, I haven't played it all the way through.
Do you care if I spoil the ending?
No, go right ahead, man.
All right. Well, I'll say, you play as the antagonist or protagonist, um, John Marston, and he almost dies in the beginning of the game. He was found by a rancher. A family owns a ranch, and they nurse him back to health, and he starts his quest. Yeah, the ending epilogue's really good, Mr. Grimm. So you get nursed back to health. You start doing work for the ranchers, and basically, like, your family's been taken away from you. The government's gotten involved. The government's basically using your family, who they've taken into custody, as kind of leverage for you to go out and hunt former members of your gang. And so you do that, and then Marston successfully completes the mission for the government. He wants to start a new life with his wife and his son. And one of the old members of the gang, the Vanderlinden gang, Uncle, and he's doing the ranching. He's get to herd some cattle and things like that, and horses, and you think that everything is going well, and John Marston's new life. He's turned a new leaf. He's put that outlaw life past him, and he believes that people can change. And next thing you know, the military shows up at his house, his ranch, and the government officials he had been working with double cross him. And there's that scene, and it's still a punch in the gut. I mean, 15 years later, it's still that ending scene with Marston being gunned down by people that he helped, while his wife and son ride away, is really just still a punch in the gut. Like, it's one of those times where I'm like, oh shit, like, really. And that's how, and then the game doesn't end there. His son Jack ends up, you go to the end of the story, and you see Jack is burying his mom, who's just passed away I think about a year or so after John Marston passed away. Uncle's passed away. You see Uncle's grave there. He's buried. He's gone back to the ranch, and Jack, their son, is buried his mom next to John, and Uncle, not really his uncle, but and then Jack goes on and exacts and avenges his father's death, finds the one individual that orchestrated his murder, and kills him, and that's the end of the game. But Red Dead, to your point, Logic, about Red Dead being a GTA clone, yeah, absolutely, 110%. Red Dead 2 is literally a generational leap in terms of visuals, the cinematic presentation of the game, but just, it doesn't feel like that GTA clone or GTA with horses the way Red Dead does. Red Dead 2 kind of feels like it stands on its own 2 feet. So I'm playing it again. I'm really enjoying it. It's really cool to play the first one and then dive deep into, or dive back into the sequel right after playing the first one. Like, you didn't have, I mean, I guess you could have, when the second one came out, gone back and played Red Dead, but I didn't do that when the Red Dead 2 released, and I'm really enjoying the experience. It actually looks pretty good too on PC. Got it. I think I've got it. I think I tinkered with some of the settings. I might be running at ultra settings now, Logic. 1440p ultra settings, and I'm getting, like, I don't know, like 90, 100 frames per second. So it looks good. The game looks pretty good on PC for being 7 years old. So, but definitely that generational leap in terms of design, graphics, even the musical score is even that much. I mean, it's a lot better in Red Dead 2. So that's what I've been playing. What about you, Logic? What have you been playing recently?
Just been playing EA Football Club 26, Call of Duty, and No Man's Sky.
Okay. So you've been playing some of those live service games, which or why people don't. Those are the things that sell consoles now, apparently.
Yeah, yeah. I've been playing Football Club of 26 on the Xbox. Call of Duty has been on PC, and then No Man's Sky on PS5 Pro.
Yeah, how's No Man's Sky these days? They talk about a comeback story, right? Remember that game released what 2000? Is it 15?
I don't know. I was not an early onboarder. I didn't actually start playing it until it showed up on PC, or on Xbox or wherever. I guess it was Xbox first and then PC. But once I onboarded, I've toe dipped, many times over years. So this is the first time I've really sat down and not been trying to play 8 other games or whatever, and just really focused on it. So having a really good time. Looks really good on the PS5 Pro at 4K.
No Man's Sky does?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I haven't played No Man's Sky in I don't know. I gotta look this up now. I gotta see when it came out. That's bugging me now. Yeah, I think I played it when it released. It came out August 9th, 2016. So 10 years ago this year. That's crazy. It's been 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I played it in 2016 on PlayStation 4 when it came out. Maybe it was PlayStation 4 Pro. This is a PS4 Pro, I think. But I didn't really, I may have played it for a couple hours and then was done. I think I bought it just to stream it at first, and then I played it and just like, okay, this isn't for me. I don't like sourcing for materials and things like that. Just wasn't for me. All right, Logic. So I do want to one of the things I wanted to talk about is the blog post that you put up about the rising cost of RAM right now. I went on Amazon the other day. I was looking at RAM prices, DDR5, and I was like, yeah, that's a bit pricey. It's a bit pricey. I think I saw 32 gigs. I want to say anywhere from like 300 to 500. I don't know if it's more expensive than that. Maybe it is. I thought I saw somebody on Twitter put like some RAM prices have gone to like $600. At least for 32 gigs. That's what I was seeing. Let me pull up your blog here.
People always like to present the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's every consumer's different, but like I was like, 250, 300, like I don't know. All right, I just pulled up your rounding off Affinity blog here, and cheap RAM was the anomaly, not the rule. I got to say, Logic, I love this picture here because it looks like this gentleman's holding cash. And
that's not to my credit. That's not to my credit. There was some meme posted on a Reddit thread somewhere.
Oh, that's hilarious. Billionaires in 2025 be like, and it's funny because there's a lot of that. I think big shout out to Nate who had like that chain that was like RAM. It was all like iced out. Logic, do you want to go ahead and just kind of give us a quick like summary of the article, because there's been a lot to do about RAM prices being very expensive. And look, I understand, like, I get the concern. Like, I understand as a consumer, like, we don't typically want to pay more for things. And I understand that initial knee-jerk reaction. It almost reminds me of, 2020 and the GPU shortage. And everyone kind of like, oh my gosh, like GPUs are going to be nuts and no one's going to be able to build a PC and, things like that. But talk a little bit about RAM prices historically, right? Because I haven't read a blog or anyone cover kind of the ebb and flows, right? The cyclical nature of the market. And in this case, as relates to RAM, because I think like you said on this show before, like, we've often been, some of us live off the hog, and sometimes those things change with price increases for whatever reason. But maybe it isn't a doomsday scenario like some are making it out to be.
Yeah, and I think the difference then, and I apologize if it sounds in the chat like my mic volume is wavering up and down. I have wave lock on and whatever, but it seems like it's auto adjusting for some reason. I don't know whether it's StreamYard or Elgato Wavelink. So just let me know if it's a problem. I think the big difference, between like the analog with the GPU situation was that with the GPU situation, we had for a very long time endured a period where kind of the entry level GPU, we kind of had an expectation for it to be like a $500 part, right? So your XX60 series RTX type card was generally something that would run between $400 and $500, and then you would scale up from there. And in general, your top end GPU was still like probably a grand or below. What we saw with the GPUs is we saw things run away well outside of historical precedents. And really now we have a situation where, we talk about the contrast between the way things used to be in the fact that number one, way back in the day, Maximum PC and PC Gamer, but really I would say Maximum PC I would let me no, I would say PC Gamer. But each of them would have like at the back of the magazine would have performance brackets for baseline builds, and they would have like budget, mid, and high end. And generally, your budget box was a $500 box. And while the magazines were still in print, we saw that creep up to like 550, 600. Um, but you're now at a point where you can't build a $500 budget box, really. And I mean, and I'm talking about like with new current parts, right? So there were builds with current parts on the market that you could come in for under $500. And you could find, budget GPUs then that were maybe a generation back that, would allow you to kind of squeeze in. And we experienced this time of like I guess it was the AMD RX, I think it was maybe the 400 series, maybe the 500 series of these cards that AMD couldn't sell that were decently performing cards. I never personally used them, but were decently performing cards. And you could get them for a song. Like they would go on ridiculously low sales and price cuts. The difference with RAM is, and this is what this article walks through, is if you've been building PCs for the last 30-ish years or so, like I have, you have seen RAM fluctuate and you have come up with thumb rules and you've understood what the market does. And what the market does is it goes through super cycles. And what that means is we go through periods where we hit significant highs and then we see significant lows. And there's not so much of the, GPU, this has been like the stock median price. And it kind of sticks to that. And it's kind of that for multiple generations in a row when the next round of, whatever series GPU comes out, and it's got the standard 3-tier SKUs. RAM prices have functioned on its super cycles and have functioned in a lot of ways much closer to like commodities. And my personal thumb rules, as I talked about in this article, and I'll talk about in one other piece of content that I post this Sunday. I developed thumb rules over this 30-year time period where I'm like, okay, a median market for RAM is $10 per gig. So if I'm going to buy a 16 gig kit and the market price is $160, the market is normal. It's what I would expect. When it goes north of that, then I know that things are contested, and there's probably other things going on, like higher gas prices cost more to ship stuff, whatever, various economic factors. What we've seen in 2018, and I think the thing that has people bugged, and then has content creators talking about a lot of things that they don't know and don't understand, and a lot of PC gamers who run around acting as if they understand everything because they've been building PCs right for the last 7 years, not the last 30, is that if you've been buying RAM since 2018, you've been buying RAM at like ridiculously low prices. When I look at like the 90-day lows before the market really started heating up on RAM prices, there were 32 gig kits going for $82. That is the thing that is the anomaly, not the high prices, the ridiculously basement bottom bucket prices that we have been paying for RAM is the thing that is way out of whack, and is that it is way out of the historical norm. I talk about in this article how we, over the last 30 years, have had these two kind of major events. There was a earthquake slash tsunami in 1999. You also had the California gas crisis of 99 and 2000, which concurrently saw RAM prices go up along with it. Shortly after that, you had Intel, and I want to say, I think this was Pentium 4. You had Intel try and debut the Pentium 4 with RAM bus or RDIMM, which was a competing memory technology to DDR. And they tried to make RAM bus mandatory for the Pentium 4. That was when it initially launched. That was the only thing to pair with it, and that was the only thing to make it compatible. And it was super performant. But the market basically said, I don't know that I need all that performance. And so, rather quickly, Intel said, okay, we're going to make Pentium 4 compatible with DDR. But the point was it heated up the market. And this combination of events that, I hate to say it, at the turn of the century, created this environment where RAM prices were really, really, really high. And then the market cooled kind of going into the 2010s, 2010s time period. And that's when, things kind of normalized, and I kind of settled on my, $10 per gigabyte thumb rule. And then, then the bottom started dropping out of it kind of in the post 2018 time period. And that's why I have rigs now that have, I have 3 out of 5 rigs that all run 64 gigs of RAM, just because it became ridiculously affordable. I just got to a point where I was like, well, why not? I don't have any need for a rig to have 64 gigs of RAM, but it's like, it's like this luxury product that has suddenly become ridiculously cheap, and I might as well just buy it. And so again, this is the thing that I think people are seeing. The problem is that we have a lot of content creators. We have a lot of content creators who are not knowledgeable on PC. We have the PC part picker warriors out on the street again, just like they came out during the PS5 Pro. We have the potato PC nation who doesn't actually spend money on PC parts anyway. And we have this kind of combinatorial force of people being a voice that there's this extinction level event going on. And that's not what it is. Again, if you needed to do a build right now, you would go out and you would buy either a 16 gigabyte RAM kit, right, for 200 to 250, and you would be paying north of that $10 per gigabyte thumb rule, but not outside the bounds of like not into the realm of an affordability crisis. Or you would buy a 32 gigabyte kit for 350, right, which is very close to that thumb rule of $10 per gig, and you would just slum it on a 16 gigabyte box until the market cooled down and you went and bought more RAM. You would buy a Mo board with 4 DIMM slots so that you could expand later, which is what I did with my boxes that have 32 gig RAM, 32 gig RAM anyway. Even though things were affordable, I built those boxes, right before we really came into the realm of like super affordability. And so I initially bought them on 16 gig kits, and then bought like two additional sticks of 8 gigabytes a piece and bumped up to 32. So you would do things like that, and those are completely acceptable tactics and strategies to use when you are a PC power enthusiast builder, not a PC potato nation, builder who just likes to tinker and claim that they're a PC gamer, but in the reality doesn't spend money and doesn't make the market go, and would just as soon take, salvage parts from a thrown away PC out of a dumpster, as go down to a Micro Center or order actual, brand new parts of current cutting edge technology.
Logic, are people like looking at DDR4 now? Because DDR5 is the expensive of the two, but do you think people are looking at like DDR4 now if they're building a rig, or like, hey,
no.
You know what? No. Okay.
Yeah. So let me talk about a little bit of the differentiated demographic, right? That has, which is not a truth that we talk to really. And I've been guilty of this, but I'm finally starting to figure it out. There are 2 different types of PC players. There's the PC potato nation, and those people are 86% of the market, right? Those people, they initially buy a rig, they sit on that rig literally until it stops working. If they upgrade, they are upgrading at like entry level GPUs. They are updating when things go on fire sale. They are not trying to keep up, and they're also not playing modern games, right? They are the same group of people that are in the pool that Piscatella talks about who are not buying new games. They're not buying modern games. They're not buying games that are demanding of performance. They're playing 7 Days to Die, DayZ, Dead by Daylight, things that don't require performance. They're playing Fallout with 38 mods installed, right? Skyrim with 15 mods installed, right? They're not part of the paying market that makes things go. They're going and buying 10 games for $5 off Steam, and that's it, right? That's not the market that we care about. That's not the market that's generating money. There's 14 to 28% of those people, right? And so, like, this is a part for me, and this is the part that I'm advertising people. Like, pay attention to the Steam hardware survey. It actually is probably not as skewed as even I've been led to believe before. Start with a baseline of thinking that it's real, right? And so when you see the high-end GPUs only formulate like the top 10 to 20%, 30% on an outlier of the high performance parts, that's real. And so those people are not going and buying DDR4 RAM. Like, those people are going to do the thing that I said. They're going to buy the car because those are the people who have the mentality that they're not going to take new money and throw it after old tech, because that makes no sense from an investment perspective. Those people are going to do what I said. They're going to go, they're going to pay a little, overprice for, something that's in their affordability and budget envelope. They're going to buy the 16 gig kit or pay a little more for the 32 gig kit, and they'll sit fine and happy on a 32 gig kit, right? They won't necessarily be living in the land of luxury, right, with the rig config at that point if they're building. But also, by the same token, I think that those people are, again, very much closer and akin to me, where they're going to ride this out because they already have rigs that are just fine, right? I mean, I had a 64 gigabyte kit of DDR5 that I bought a year ago that was just sitting here, right, that I let somebody have. So I have machines now. I don't know that I guess I have 3 machines out of 5 that are on DDR4, 2 machines that are on DDR5. I don't have any need to upgrade. And I think most of the people who are power PC enthusiasts are just fine, and don't have any need. And if they've got to do an incremental upgrade and bump another 16 gigabytes of RAM or bump 32 gigs of RAM, they'll just pay the $50 extra, right, and go out and buy those kits, because those are kits that are available on the market. They're not $500 kits. They're not $700 kits. And those people don't need the 64 gig kits. And those are the things that are going for ridiculous prices, because those are the things that are contested, because those are the things that are needed in the enterprise. Nobody in the enterprise is looking to stock a data center with a 16 gigabyte RAM kit. Right. So on the supply chain side, obviously they're not buying like retail RAM kits, right? But on the supply chain side, they're not looking for 16 gigabyte chips, right? They're looking for things that scale higher. So again, if you needed to do a build right now, you would go out and you'd buy a 16 or a 32 gigabyte kit if you were a power PC enthusiast who was accustomed to spending money. The rest of them don't spend money anyway, and so they don't matter, right, in terms of what is the impact of this current cycle.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think for me, like I still have a 3070. I'm probably gonna stay put for a little bit, and actually, like I looked at like similar builds that I've priced out like similar builds and what I paid for back in, I guess 2021 is when I got mine. Was it 21 or 22? I don't remember now.
22.
It was 22. And I'm still like pretty much within like, I don't know. I mean, it might be 100, 150 more, than what I paid. But I mean, at that point, I think I paid 2 something. At that point, I look at it like if I'm at $2,000, like what's another 150 at that point, So I can't say I've and again, I have a pre-built, so I'm looking at that from that perspective, right? I can't say I've seen dramatic increase in the pre-builts that are, I'd be looking at a 5070 card, right? And very similar build to what I have now. In terms of, I have 32 gig as memory now, so I'm looking at DDR5 memory. So again, it's around that. It's about 150 about 150 more than what I paid for my 3070 rig 4 years ago now. So Logic, do you think? I mean, because I don't think we'll go back to those like you said that anomaly, that the cheap, the years of cheap memory. I think will probably, I would imagine probably something it will probably flatten out, right? I don't think we'll see increases at some point. I know some analysts are saying, maybe mid to late 2026, we'll see, things kind of flatten out. Maybe 2027, they might decrease a bit, but yeah, it's probably not going to go back to how cheap it was like a couple of years ago or
I
before,
mean,
before the big demand happened. Yeah.
I mean, maybe. I mean, again, it's super cycle and RAM is very much near a commodity. I actually do expect at some point, right? Again, I mean, remember I'm talking about like a 30-year cycle. So do I expect that we'll eventually get to another pricing bathtub like that, like between 2025 and 2055? Yeah, I do. Um, and again, that may be inflation adjusted or value of the dollar adjusted, but I mean, yeah, I think RAM will eventually absolutely get to that affordability point because again, it's a commodity and there's not a ton of differentiation between like Kingston, G Skill, and Corsair, right? It's you pick and most of them are the same RAM anyway because there's only there's only three providers of RAM, right? There was Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. And so right again, there's not a ton of differentiation in the market. You're buying, that Ozark cup at Walmart is the exact same cup as Yeti. It's just when they get to the end of the line, they fork on the conveyor belt and go one of which way to get stamped with a brand, right? But it's the same cup, and that's exactly like the RAM market is. So
Yeah.
yeah, but again, that's when will that happen? I don't know. And this is my big thing is like I also don't think real consumers again who are spending money um live their lives on that basis, right? So a real PC gamer who actually spends money and periodically upgrades their rig just because um I don't know that any of us are of that mentality where we're like, well, I'm never going to build again until like the market flattens out at 82 gigabyte, $82 32 gigabyte RAM kits.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm trying. I'm looking at PCs pre builds right now. Yeah. Again, I think for me, I mean, I'm just going to stay put for right now. I mean, I'm still getting some decent performance. I'm not brute forcing things the way I was when I first got this PC. Um, and I'm certainly not going to sit on this PC for 20 years because although I've heard that PCs last 20 years,
30.
30 years. I'm sorry, 30 years.
I mean, as far as growing price, like I haven't done any price comparisons, but like just off a quick rip, Cyber Power PC, um, a 9800 X3D, I think is what I was like. Yeah, 9800 X3D with a 360 millimeter AIO, 32 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM, and an RTX 5080. Am I not seeing? I am kind of curious what the hard drive size is because I hate these boxes that come with one terabyte hard drive. But that's a rig that is 2750 right now. So that's probably a little more than I would want to pay for that, but that's also a pretty beefy rig that is going to serve you for 3 to 5 years probably. Put you in a position to do some incremental upgrades for higher end parts should they come out. And again, of course, I would not recommend personally buying a PC from CyberPower PC Inc. But again, just as a baseline, that's I don't think that's a ridiculous,
Yeah.
price point or expectation for what's going on in the market right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I'm being judged here. Cyber Power.
No, I have a CyberPower PC too. Remember? That's
right. Yeah.
That's why I'm not recommending buying because I had to entirely rip out my cooling system and replace it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Thank goodness I didn't have that experience, but yeah, no, that's sorry to hear that sucks, man. Although I didn't like the way they mounted my radiator, so you probably should have put it on the top, but anyhow, another conversation. All right, let me no, it's great read too, by the way, Logic. I thought this was I would encourage everyone to read this blog. I drop the link in the live chat. I thought it was a really good read. One that I didn't see really covered. I don't know. It's interesting because we always talk about like this. I just feel like a lot of the times, a lot of it's just doom and gloom, right? drop the link here in the live chat for the Rounding Off Affinity blog here if you want to read that article. It's a great read. But Logic, it's also it's great because it adds some nuance to the conversation, and I think a lot of the times what we have, I guess if you want to call it bad news or price increases, there's always this knee jerk reaction: the sky is falling. I'm probably less tolerant of it now, where I'm in the position, or I'm in the mindset of, well, yeah, look, I don't care for prices to go up, but if they do, as a consumer, I'm going to make a decision, and it's either you buy or you don't buy. You know, um, it's kind of some of the conversation I'm seeing right now. Pull this article up right now. It's actually a good segue into this article here.
Yeah, and BRAP, I do just want to put
Yeah.
one punctuation mark on
Yeah,
that
yeah,
too.
go ahead, man. Yeah.
Like in what I am not saying is, I'm not saying that prices are not going to continue to go up, and I'm not saying that prices are not bad, and I'm not saying that prices aren't prohibitive for some people. This is the thing that we've been dealing with, right, in the PC world since, as you mentioned, like the crypto crisis and the pandemic, and that's and in other places in consumer electronics, and that's, as you and I always say, this is our problem. People act like this isn't happening elsewhere, and it's a matter of the choices that you make. For me, who's a PC gamer, but also somebody who lives in the Apple ecosystem, one of the realizations I had to come to and admit last February, when like or maybe March, when the spring Apple device announcement was made, I was like, and I struggled with it, and I agonized, and I ran all sorts of numbers, and I just said, I have to admit, I've been priced out of the iPad Pro market, right? Like, I can't afford an iPad Pro. I could afford an iPad Pro. I choose, like, it's gotten to a point where, like, I'm not going to pay that for that device, right? I'll take a step down and buy the iPad Air. But what has been going on for a very long time in the PC market in similar fashion is you have tiers and tiers and tiers and tiers of the addressable market being priced out, right? And people get mad, right? So there's people that I talked about, like that $500 like entry level like graphics card. Like there's a brief time where that kind of went off the landscape and people were angry. We're getting back to a point where that's kind of back now, but now people are like, I don't want to spend $500 for that 3000 series, for that XX60 SKU GPU. I'm going to buy something cheaper or on sale or a generation or two back. And the cards that scale up from that, they're just not worth it to me. Um, and 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 as those things like move in gradients, right? Again, people get priced out of markets, and so, like I said, people get mad, but you have to deal.
Yeah, and that's kind of my point. Like, I agree with you. Like, we're not saying that this has zero impact, or that prices won't go up again, or yeah. But my only point was, again, I hope I'm not sounding dismissive. It's just like, like, we just, as a consumer, you just make a choice, like, right, like you do with other consumer products. Um, you figure it out. You make decisions. You know. Um, and that's kind of like, and that's kind of what I've seen with this article here. There's a rumor, and I forget who it was. Logic, I know you and I talked about this earlier. Is it Pirate? Who's It's a Twitter account, or I guess this person, are they a content creator? Pirate Games or something? Is that who broke the Steam Machine price being leaked? Or go to the WCCF Tech article here. Steam Machine price may have just leaked via Czech retailer. The article states here 950 USD for a 512 gigabyte model, 1070 USD for a 2 terabyte model. Let's see. Look at the update here. Let's see here. So here's the tweet here. And so yeah, I've seen some interesting replies here. At least on social media. One particular content creator said, when I saw this earlier today, that in fact, if this is true, if the Steam Machine is 900 and go back up here. $950 for the 512 gigabyte model and $1,000 for the 2 terabyte. That we're cooked, and I'm like, we're not really cooked. You just either you don't buy it, and just move on, or yeah, you're gonna be bummed out consumer that maybe this thing maybe this thing is maybe outside of what you were willing to pay. But honestly, like if it is $950 for the 512 and the 1,000, I thought this thing might be in that $700 to $1,000 price point for the Steam machine. So if this is true, like I can't say I'm totally like I don't want sticker shock looking at the 950 to 1,070 price range for the Steam machine. Let me grab the super chat here real quick. Gaming Ledger with the $5 Canadian says, always curious why PC gaming never really took off on Macs. Fairly fixed specs would be better for optimization, and Mac OS is the closest OS to Metal. You got any thoughts on that super chat there, Logic?
Yeah, I would say just keep an eye on that market. I've been doing, I picked up the MacBook Pro M5 when it launched this fall. Ran some testing on it. Ran it against my MacBook Air M4, my Mac Mini M4. The MacBook 5 M5 is the first, right? We've hit that moment where I feel like there's a performance discussion, right, to be had. I think I was playing the RE4 remake at 1440p with everything maxed out, getting 75 frames per second. So I think we're kind of at the point now where there's truly viable performance. And the performance had been there before, but there was always you were always trying to make compromises, right, to get it over 60 frames per second. And 60 frames per second, like on PC, we use that like it's a metric, right? And I get it. I will say for me, for everyday gaming, 60 frames per second is not acceptable, right? Like 60 frames per second is the bare minimum. But from there, I'm generally going to tweak, and if I see something that can only hit 60 frames per second, then I have a problem with that. At 75 frames per second, that's where I expect like a high end game to be coming in with things maxed out on really performant hardware. That's like I said, but I think we're starting to finally enter a generation where there's a real discussion. In the M5 over the M4 was, I can't remember what it was like. It's supposed to be like a 33% performance increase. So I think there's a discussion to be had there that will continue to progress as they continue to roll out, right, iterations of the M chip from Apple. So hopefully we'll see a little more traction there. I think I think 007 First Light is launching on Mac. I feel like I'm starting to see more games that are coming out with a Mac version at launch. I don't know. Maybe hopefully that will continue.
Thank you for that super chat, Gaming Ledger. Yeah, so Logic, I was just saying, I had this thing priced between like 700, 750 and 1,000 for the Steam machine. Again, this is a rumor, it hasn't been confirmed, but according to the Czech retailer, this leak, I don't know if it's a leak, this rumor. I got the tweet right here. 950 to a little bit over 1,000 for the different models here. What do you think, Lodge? Any thoughts on this rumor? I mean, did you have any like when they announced this? Did you think that this thing might be between 700 or 1,000 in price?
I said that it could be I said that it could be 800 to 1,200 for the high end SKU for the 2 terabyte, and it's really a matter of what strategy Valve chooses to employ with pricing it. And I've said that either they are going to put pricing in line with the Steam Deck and look at that as a scalable family of hardware. And so if you've got the 550 SKU Steam Deck and the 650 SKU Steam Deck, then you would expect the 512 gigabyte Steam machine to come in north of that 650 SKU. So probably like 750. 750 to 850 depending on market conditions. Then you could expect the 2 terabyte SKU to come in north of that. So you're probably talking 850 to 1,000, right? And then plus or minus some for tariffs and other things. that's what I initially thought. I think my impression over the last few months has been that really the components that are in that Steam machine are really a bit further behind in terms of generations of AMD architecture than I kind of originally thought, and so there's room, I think, for that price to be even lower. Um, this thing about how much it's believed to be in Czech, um, I think maybe in Czech that might be what it is, but I don't think that that's reflective of what it's going to be in the U.S. Um, so you know, it's it's a data point that's out there, but to me it doesn't mean a whole lot.
Yeah, did we ever discuss like who this thing is for? Because I'm still wondering, kind of like I guess this would be for somebody. I mean, would this be like, I don't know. I guess this would be for something like a hardcore gamer, right? Like somebody who wants to have everything, can afford to have everything. I mean, would you agree with that logic, or do you think that this might be for the consumer, also for the consumer, kind of maybe sits between kind of that mid level PC and maybe high end console tier?
I wasn't going with you when you said hardcore gamer, but when you put it in the context of like the
I
gamer
meant
who,
like like an enthusiast, right? Like a, maybe not hardcore gamer, but like an enthusiast, right?
I would put it in the context of like the gamer who already has everything. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to say this as a flex, but like I like spending money, um, and like literally, like I've been struggling for months to like find excuses to make for things to buy. Um, like, I'm at the point like where the only other thing I could buy is like a handheld, and I'm like, I don't want to spend $1,000 on a handheld. So, like, if for that type of consumer, that's what I think. That's one of the things that I think this is for. The things that I've mentioned is, for me, it'll be a boutique buy, it'll be a fashion buy, it'll be because I have a workstation with a Mac Mini M4. And I think it'll be a neat idea to have like a little gaming cube right on that workstation, right where everything kind of looks like really clean and really neat because I have a lot of power and very small envelope, mechanical envelope packages. So I think that'll be one of the types of demographics it's for. I think another person who it's for from a tech perspective is the person who is on like older hardware, who is like, hey, I'd like to upgrade, but GPU prices aren't great right now. RAM prices aren't great right now. I think what I'll go ahead and do is I'll go ahead and buy this box for now, which will give me a little more oomph from where I am. And then I'll hold off on doing like spending money on like another major upgrade, on my real rig in a year or two. Um, that niche is going to be incredibly price dependent, right? Because if you get outside that envelope of where that person doesn't want to spend money as a PC gamer, um, I don't know that they're going to spend. Um, and then, maybe there will be, some console gamers that'll come over, but those numbers will be small. What I've said is the way this thing is going to play, the user base for this, the install base for this is going to be an aggregate of a niche of niches. It's going to be these really skinny, hyper specific consumer use cases that are going to attract people. And they'll get into it, and the tribes that make up the demographics of that market, there's not going to be a ton of relatability, right? They're very skinny verticals, for people in specific situations that may find this appealing. But a lot of those are going to be dependent on price, and if the price comes in too high, then those addressable markets will probably like fall out.
Yeah, definitely not a mass market item by any stretch of the imagination. And yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've thought about, okay, like if I'm not going to upgrade the PC, if I maybe hold off for another year or so, maybe the Steam machine might be an option, kind of that in between, that stopgap till I decide to upgrade. But for me, it's going to depend on how well the Steam machine performs, right? Price to
And
performance for me. So yeah.
and I think I mentioned to you, I can't remember what site it was, but there was a site who went and kind of like bought commensurate parts, equivalent parts with the components that are in the Steam machine, and I saw the performance envelope, and I was like, no, like this is falling out of the bottom of like, for me, a radar range where it would make sense. At a certain point, if it doesn't at least like come in alongside of like my lowest end rig, then it becomes questionable of like why I would even bother. Particularly if it's a piece of kit that's going to be north of $800.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What are your specs on your low end rig?
So my lowest end rig right now is an AMD Ryzen 5 5600X, 32 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, and an RTX 3080 Ti.
Okay, wow.
And I don't think this thing is really going to do numbers that even keep up with your current config, right?
Okay,
So
well,
because you're on a
yeah. If
you're
that's
on
the
a
case, Logic
30 you're on a
3070.
3070. Yeah,
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 yeah. And if that's the case, then I'm not going to bother buying this. That's money best spent elsewhere than for me. You know,
yeah,
if that performance is not on par with at least my 3070.
yeah. And this is not a machine being made for you to play like Borderlands 4 at 4K and high frame rates, right? This is a machine being built so you can play Hollow Knight Silk Song, in 4K on a big screen TV. So you can play like through your legacy game library, right? In the games that you're buying, you probably play an Assassin's Creed game, right? Odyssey, Origins, Valhalla, right? And get decent performance. But like again, this isn't the thing that you buy to play the slate of new release games that are coming out in 2026.
Yeah, you're not going to be playing. Not going to be probably playing. I can't think of a game that's coming out in 2026, but yeah, you're not going to be playing a big AAA release. Probably on this machine at 4K 30 FPS. So
you might get like 4K 30, right, with tricks. When I say
okay,
like you're not going to get performance, I mean you're not going to get 4K 60. You're not going to get all the bells and whistles turned on, et
I see what
cetera.
you're saying. Yeah, but you think you might get native 4K?
Yeah, I don't know that anything is really native 4K, right? And I mean the number of targets that truthfully
Mhm.
wear that label are so small that
That's true.
I don't know why anybody makes a big deal out of it. Not saying that's what you were, but like the people who do the well, is anything native 4K on the PS5 Pro? And I'm like, well, nothing's native 4K anywhere. They're all using upscaling. So let's stop making it as if consoles upscale and PCs don't, because PCs upscale.
Yeah, I don't know if this thing. Now that I'm thinking about it, again, I need to see how this thing performs. But to your point, like if it's below the 3070, it's not going to make sense for you. My PC's hooked up to my 65-inch OLED, so it allows me to couch game in front of the TV. Yeah, it probably wouldn't. You know, I could probably think of I could save that money, just use it towards a future upgrade of the PC if that's the case. So,
Yeah, I mean,
uh, yeah,
I think the other part of the market, that might be attracted to is for people who are wed very, very, very closely to their Steam library, right? People for whom their Steam library is everything. Then that changes the optics on it, right? Then maybe this is a device for you. And if you've been trying to get that PC in the living room, but you don't want it in a ugly alien head case, where it
I
can't
like
be
I like
hidden in
the
your
Alienware cases, but
No, I mean not the Alienware, but like all of the knockoff Alienware cases, that are just really ugly monstrosities. Um, then this might be something for you, because that's where you're invested in your library, and having this adjunct piece of gear to elegantly place in the living room, might be okay.
yeah, I can't imagine that. If you have a missus that she might want to have, she probably doesn't want if your gaming rigs in your living room, they probably don't want to see that, right? This big tower PC with the radiator and RGBs, right? I know some people have setups like that. So, I do want to grab this other super chat, second super chat by the Gaming Ledger, the $5 Canadian super chat. Thank you there. Gaming Ledger says, I think ultimately the Steam Machine is a showcase for Steam OS, its adoption by other OEMs as a POC outside of the Steam Deck. So, what are your thoughts on that, Logic?
Yeah, probably definitely, not and it's also, I mean, I think really the Steam machine is really there to sell Steam frames as well, right? To give you kind of a cheap entry position comparatively, to use a Steam frame, right? Rather than hooking it up to, a $2,000, $3,000 rig, particularly when at least to date there hasn't been any indication that that thing tethers, to really allow you to extract maximum performance out of it. So,
Okay. Yeah.
if it's a wireless only connection, then that's not something that I want to pay a lot of. That's not something that I want to have an expensive like PC rig requirement to go along with it, right? And so that Steam machine is another entry point to kind of get that into the hands of gamers. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think Steam OS adoption I think is a big thing. I've written a lot of pieces about the coming battle is really between um, PlayStation and Nintendo have really segmented the market and divvied up those spoils, and are each probably going to stay in their own lane. Um, the other part of the fight is going to be the micro PC fight between Xbox and Steam, and it's going to be a battle of operating systems.
Windows versus Steam. All right, Lodge, you want to move on to side of interesting. Been a lot of, as there always is. I don't know if the gaming ledger actually, if you remember, Logic, I told you we talked earlier today. I said I had this back and forth about ARPU and Mao. Gaming ledger was actually in that in that thread on X. So I'm not going to talk about that though. But I'm going to talk about this tweet that I put out because a lot of just specific community, I think we all know who it is. They've really been doubling down, especially the last, I feel like, month and a half on, again, we are talking about the role that exclusives play in the gaming space and trying to prove that, that exclusives really aren't drivers, right? They don't really drive consumers to invest in platforms that are ecosystems. Proof positive of that is most played games. You see that. I always see that Circana chart being thrown about. Oh, well, look at Circana chart. Look at the most played games. That's proof that exclusives don't matter or people don't buy consoles for exclusives. And I'm like, no, that's just measuring the time that people are investing in specific games. And you and I've talked about the Circana data that came out last year that showed, at least on console, that gamers are spending 40% of their time on live service games, which means that they're spending the other 60% of their time outside of live service games. So, and I because again, the most played list has been used to kind of weaponize or drive home that narrative of exclusives don't matter and they don't really move the needle for platforms. And so I tweeted this out a couple days ago. Most played games, especially measured by reoccurring live service titles like Fortnite, it's a very narrow slice of the market. It only tells us what retains daily engagement, and not what drives console purchases, what differentiates platforms, what creates cultural moments, critical acclaim, long-term IP value. I think that's the other thing people forget about exclusivity. We always talk about the award show, and then we often see that there's, exclusives will often drive some of those cultural moments, that critical acclaim, some of those things that fans or gamers remember. You heard me talk about Halo when Microsoft announced Halo was going to PS5, and I shared kind of my experience with Halo for the first time that I loaded up into the original Xbox and was just blown away, and the cultural impact that that Halo had on the industry and on consumers at the time. But that's the thing, like we always discuss here on the show, like Logic, like with these conversations, there's never any real like nuance, right? It's very just blanket statement of, well, you look, most played games, that's proof that that gamers don't buy consoles for exclusives or engage in ecosystems for exclusives or product differentiators. Like, no, it's a bit more complicated than just that. Like my conversation around Mao and ARPU. But I thought that there was an interesting follow-up question here, Logic. And Peter, I think Peter is a contributor at Season Gaming. We've had Ains on the show. It's been a while, but actually a couple of years since we've had Ains on from Season Gaming, and I've been a guest on that show previously on their podcast, but it's been a couple of years. But Peter at Season Gaming said, "Question: Do you think exclusives are as important to Sony now as they were during the end of the PS3 and all of the PS4 generation? Now that they've effectively won and people are locked into their ecosystems and they are the de facto console for third party." So I thought this is kind of an interesting question. Like, and this is kind of a new narrative that I've been seeing too, Logic, where people are saying, well, PlayStation's pretty much, they've wrapped up the market, and so maybe exclusives aren't that important. And I think, well, you look at Nintendo and like you just said, Logic, like Nintendo and PlayStation kind of carved up their own lanes now, right? Their own pieces of the pie and can kind of control those markets that they sit in. But Nintendo kind of sits by itself more or less. And I don't see Nintendo not doubling down on exclusives, even though no one really effectively competes with them. But I thought it was an interesting question, and it made me think about the way that Sony leveraged exclusives during the PS3 generation and the PS4 generation. And I brought this up because people often say, "Oh, well, they really, PlayStation doesn't have any exclusives; they're on PC." And I'm like, "Yeah, I get it. Like the evolution of there has been, and I'll admit this, there's been an evolution of exclusives and how the platform owners leverage exclusives, but Sony's not putting their games like the God of War 2018, Ragnarok, or Tilu 1, Tilu 2. They're not putting those games on competitive platforms like Xbox. They're not putting those games on Nintendo Switch. So there's also still timed exclusivity. Platform exclusivity is a thing. But I thought it was an interesting question. Like, and I said, look, I don't think the exclusives are like existential for Sony as they were like at the end of the PS3 or PS4 generation. But I also did make an important point to say that, look, but that doesn't mean that they're not important anymore. And the example I gave with the PS3 and PS4 generation about how exclusives functioned for Sony at that time, that at least for Sony, PlayStation exclusives were about survival and momentum. Like, remember the disastrous launch of the PlayStation 3, and you go get a second. They'll go get a second job. I forget what was actually said, but something to the effect like, yeah.
No, so, we think people will get a second job.
Yeah,
to buy a PlayStation 3.
Yeah, and the consumer said, "No, we're not doing that. Yeah, pump your brakes. Like, we're not doing that. Like, we already have sticker shock here, and now it's kind of a slap to the face. You could tell us we're going to get new jobs or a second job. No, we're not doing that." And the 360 already had the year head start and had good momentum, post launch. But so I said, like, and you and I've talked about like the end of the PlayStation 3 generation, like Naughty Dog, The Last of Us, right? Ending the generation for the PS3 and then rolling into the PS4 generation. So my response was that Sony needed must play titles, exclusives to rebuild that consumer trust, drive hardware adoption, flip the narrative. I mean, the 360 at the time, the Xbox 360 was the darling consumer product or gaming console for many consumers and the media, as much as people like to point out media bias. It's funny, I used to hear PlayStation fans actually make those accusations during the 360 generation, say that, oh, it's media bias is why our version of Skyrim is getting lower review scores. It's like, no, it's because of the ports typically played better. Third party ports typically performed better on the 360 than they did the PlayStation 3. So I mentioned those things, and I said now PlayStation also benefits from consumer inertia. I've talked about that on this show. And I don't disagree. It's kind of been like the default box for third party games. But I also say, look, like exclusives still matter because they protect that position out for Sony. It's kind of it helps to play defense a bit, but also it anchors that brand identity. It justifies premium hardware and pricing. When they roll out the PS5 Pro, Logic, like, what do they always do? They're always like, oh, you know what? Like, yeah, you look at Tilu 2 remaster for PS5 Pro. Look, it's 60 FPS and it's 4K now. And so They do all these things to, justify that, that premium price on something like the PS5 Pro, and showing you how some of their first party games take advantage of that technology that's in the PS5 Pro. And I said also prevent erosion towards Xbox or subscription only ecosystems. I said Xbox and PC as subscription only ecosystems. And I also mentioned too, like, look, like vendor lock in isn't 100%. I don't believe it is. And I also think that new consumers are still entering the market. I know people, we talked about on this show, people always say, oh, the market's not growing. Well, that's not entirely true. At least this console generation, Sony's talked about like 30% of PS5 owners are new and didn't own a PS4. So, and I basically summed up like exclusives aren't doing the same thing necessarily, right, that they did in 2013, but that doesn't make them less important. I think that Sony's leveraging them in different ways than they did back to the PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4 generation. And then his response was like, I agree with some points here, though I do think overall, given their position in the market and the competition, they barely far less important now than 10 years ago. Where else do new gamers go entering the market? They either want PC, in which case they'll do that, or they want a console, in which case the only real option will likely be PlayStation. I agree they still hold some importance, but hugely lessen, in my opinion. So, yeah, what do you think, Logic? I know you and I talked about this a little bit earlier today, but what do you think of some of the points that were brought up in this conversation?
Yeah, I always go back to the data. I always go back to quantification. You can argue about whether or not they're more important or not. I think the real question that I would say in terms of what is important to a company in terms of their strategy is based on where they're putting their investment dollars. And if there's a notion that Sony is spending less money today on exclusives, that Sony is maintaining a stable of a smaller number of studios, if they are greenlighting smaller budgets for games today than they did before, then that's a discussion to have. But there's no indication of that at this point. They're maintaining a stable of whatever it is, 23 to 24, 25 studios. They are spending millions of dollars, to north of $1 billion a year on first party development. They maintain a production pipeline, attempting to get those games out. They are investing in, in an IP portfolio and producing content on that. And that content is not going to every other platform. Some of that content is going to PC in a very selective governance process that determines, when things go. That content is not wholesale going over to Xbox. So, again, you can argue about, whether or not it is as important. I don't really care. Like, you can have an opinion of whether or not it's, I don't know what your scale is. Like, what is the subjective scale? That it's a 5 now versus a 10 in the past. I mean, sorry for the demonetization, but I'm kind of like, who gives a shit? Like, the point is that from a strategy perspective, they're a platform company, and they are, as a result of running a platform business, maintaining a stable of first party studios and retaining the vast majority of that content on their own platform. And then they have staged, deliberate, conscious choices when they send that content over to PC. They're sending some lesser IP and some things that would not move the needle for them on console, and allowing other publishers to publish that content in onesie twosie. They are making commercial deals with other licensing entities who are like being very bullish on that. They want their titles on over platforms like the MLB publishing IP arm, and then Lego. None of that results in PlayStation spending less money, right, on exclusives now. So regardless of what like all the subjective barometers are that are out there, today where we are is that it is a core component of their strategy, period.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of hypotheticals in this conversation. Not the conversation you and I are having, but the conversation around exclusivity. I think like you brought up like one of the things I said, like it allows Sony to control their own destiny, not be solely reliant on third parties. And I look at that from a revenue standpoint. Like, I think you just mentioned like they allow Sony to maybe make a game that a third party publisher would have made. Did you? I don't know if you said that or not, if I heard that correctly. But I made the argument like it allows them to monetize, like we think about the revenue split, right? They make these big AAA games. They get all that 100% of that. They don't have to split. But I agree with you, Logic. Like as it stands today, they're still investing millions and billions of dollars in propping up first party studios and in creating first party content, right? Because they still want to sell you hardware. They still want to justify that premium, that price point, that premium price point now, which seems to be crazy for the increase in prices of consoles across the board now. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of arguments that are centered and pinioned on this notion of people who like agnostic technology solutions, and just don't understand the notion of brand equity, right? Like tons of Android handsets get sold. The reason tons of them get sold is because so many of them are cheap, inexpensive. The margins on them are practically zero. The only way they make margin is by the software that they put on them. And so they make deals with lots of people, right, to do those things to eke out some type of a living selling those handsets. The Androids that make money are Samsung almost solely, Motorola to a lesser extent, and then mixtures of Chinese manufacturers, in particular OnePlus. And the only way that they have achieved brand identity, that brand identity is not Android and it's not Google. I mean, and as a person who is kind of agnostic and preferred open solutions, like the Samsung brand identity has been one that has often frustrated me, even when I was like a big Samsung handset fan. It's like I don't want like your Samsung stuff. I just want this handset and I want it to run Android and I want you to get out of my face and get out of my way. And there are people who prefer that, but big markets, right, flock to things with brand identity. And that's why Apple is a multi-trillion-dollar company. And Apple has a brand identity. You and I talked earlier today. I'm like, is music as important to the Apple brand identity as it was during the iPod generation? I might say no, maybe, but like it is an inherent part of the Apple identity. And so they keep making investments in it and they keep doing it. That's why, when the iPod transformed into the phone, and then iTunes started slipping in relevance, they went to do Apple Music. Did they have to do Apple Music? I mean, there's plenty of music services on the iPhone, right? But Apple needed a first party music service tightly coupled to its brand identity because Apple is music, right? That's the association people have with it. And that's part of what gets people to keep buying those handsets. So, I mean, PlayStation has a brand identity that is tightly coupled and heavily oriented around the content that goes hand in hand with the console. Those studios, the games they make, the IP that stands on that console. It is not an everyman commodity, right? Bushel of games from, Golden Corral, and country breakfast buffet, that exists, on the thing. Like if
maybe they have biscuits and gravy when you said country breakfast buffet, I got a little hungry.
And if you want that, you buy a PC.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a reason that they do it. Again, people can be cranky about it, but what I find most interesting about this conversation is it attempts to call the notion of exclusivity into question, but yet the only brand that's brought up is PlayStation.
Yeah, Nintendo and Nintendo's always given that pass. Oh, well, Nintendo's different. What? Yeah.
Right. So the crazy thing is, again, let's go back to numbers. Let's go back to objectivity.
Yeah.
There are 3 platform, right, competitors in the space: Nintendo, Xbox, and PlayStation. So if you're going to say that, like, Nintendo is the exception, like that doesn't make any like logical sense to me. Like,
no, it doesn't.
You might, it makes more logic to me to say, well, it seems like PlayStation and Nintendo, from a content perspective, are oriented around this notion of a business that seems to go hand in hand with what a console is.
Mm-hmm.
And Xbox is the one exception to that. And that being the exception seems to go hand in hand with a, grotesquely small, underwhelming, and shrinking market share that seems to indicate what the market is showing that it has a demand for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we look at like the Circana numbers, right? We see how well the exclusives are selling for both Nintendo and Sony. We've talked about Ghost of Yote on this show, where I don't know where it's going to be. Circana hasn't released the December numbers yet, but as of November of last year, it was the top 10. It was the 10th best selling game of the year for 2025 within a month of its release. So, I mean, that means something, right? We talk about demand and the impact of exclusivity and whether consumers value those things. I mean, think about it for a second. Think about all the games that get released in a given year that are third party games. And you have a game that's, released to a platform of, to a platform that has a consumer base of, 80, 83, 84 million. I don't know how much it is now. 82, I'll say 82 to 84 million. I forget the number. It manages to outperform games that are released to multiple platforms. And it's the top 10. It's the 10th best selling game of 2025 in a month's time. So just think about that impact for just a second. So, look, this conversation has the 13 years that I've been on gaming Twitter. This conversation never came up until Microsoft pivoted its strategy. And people forget that Microsoft didn't pivot its strategy, or Xbox didn't pivot its strategy because exclusives don't matter. They pivoted their strategy because they had issues and they executing a successful console business model. So, I mean, I think we need to remember that when we have this conversation. It wasn't a signal by the market per se that was saying to Microsoft, Xbox, we don't want exclusives anymore. And Microsoft's like, oh, we're going to get ahead of Sony and Nintendo. So, any other thoughts on that topic, Logic, before we move on to the Xbox Developer Direct?
Yeah, my prediction is that no matter how great a burger restaurants make, they will always continue to make fries. Right? And their fries will always be a thing that differentiates them, even if it's not as important as the burger. And because
wow,
it's a differentiator, they will probably continue to make it.
Look, it's funny you say that, because when I think about going to Five Guys, yes, I love the burgers, but you know what I always say leaving? Damn, those fries are good.
And this is the greatness of the analogy, right? Don't sit here and freaking tell me that people don't, on days, make choices about what fast food restaurant they go to, right, based on the fries.
I mean, it's one of the reasons why many people still go to McDonald's.
Absolutely,
because of the fries. It's so funny. It's so funny you say that, because I've gone to restaurants and had burgers and eaten the fries, like, oh man, these fries are terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, and then you think about Five Guys, and I brought up Five Guys, like, yeah, I mean, like, that's when Five Guys started becoming a thing 20 something years ago. I remember the one thing that I heard was, the burgers are good. The fries are amazing.
Sure. Five Guys burgers aren't that great.
Yeah, I mean, they're not the best burgers I've had. They're good. But the fries, the fries are what stands out, right?
Yeah. You walk out there with that sack of fries. And you see the grease. You see the grease permeating through the paper.
You're not that. They give you a freaking cup, right?
Yeah.
And then You ever see them fill it up? They got the big scooper.
No,
they got the
that's
cup.
the thing. The portions are ridiculous.
Yes.
The fries are a meal in and of themselves.
Oh my god, I'm going to get Five Guys this weekend.
Yeah.
No, you literally like I when I was younger, I would get the large fry, and you literally like the fries would be there's literally like a second large fry helping in the bag falling out of the cup. But to your point about the fry analogy, like it's a differentiator, right? And it's that brand identity. It gets people remembering, right? And thinking about, oh, wait a minute. You talk about the tiebreaker. That's the tiebreaker sometimes for me.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Am I going to go to Red Robin or am I going to go to Five Guys? Oof, I don't know those fries, right? And then when I go there, I'm waiting for my order. I get to eat peanuts.
Hey, does Dairy Queen ever enter the conversation? No.
No, I don't like the fries at Dairy Queen. I don't even like Dairy Queen burgers.
Yeah.
Product differentiation.
It's not that hard a concept. We people spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars going to get an MBA. And the difference between an MBA and my business graduate degree is that when I took accounting, those guys take marketing. 4 quarters, semesters of marketing, whatever, at probably $3,000 to $6,000 per course. That is not a small amount of money that is spent so that people understand this notion of brand and identity and brand equity. And those people command salaries, 6-figure salaries in Northward when they go out competitively on the human capital market. It's not for no reason.
I mean, you got me thinking about fast food. Like you go to Chick-fil-A, right? They have waffle fries.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not done. Like that's not done by accident, by the way.
Yeah. Hey, there's a reason Arby's had curly Q fries, and there's a reason why when they didn't feel that gave them enough anchored traction on the market, they introduced crinkle fries. And there's a choice now when you go there.
I do like
there are reasons
fries.
people do these things.
Yeah, they're not done willy-nilly. Well, that's the thing that frustrates me, the conversation, that it's overly simplified, right? And it's really like, let's just keep it a buck. I mean, it's overly simplified, stripped of all nuance, because people want to defend a specific company's pivot, change of direction, new strategy, rather than just saying, hey, you know what? I like this new strategy. This strategy works for me. It's good.
Well, and that's the thing, and that's part of the problem, and the frustrating thing with the conversation, right? The strategy actually makes sense for Xbox.
Oh, absolutely.
And it actually does multiple things for them, not just the console market. Adjacencies with PC, right? The fact of like the position they stand in there. This effort, though, to take it and label it and say, this is what everyone else needs to do is where we have the problem.
Yeah, 110%. I agree with you. Like it aligns with Microsoft's, with their philosophy as an organization, right? Software as a service. We're everywhere. Someone said DQ chicken strips are great. I've never had those. All right. What's that, Logic?
No. I haven't had those either.
There was one more thing I was gonna bring up. I forgot. Oh, speaking of Xbox, looks like the pre-orders for Avowed are up now on the PlayStation 5 or for the PS5. It's priced at $49.99. This is for the standard version. So that's officially coming to the Xbox. Are you surprised by that price point of $49.99?
No. One thing that I'm very curious to kind of see and watch and observe this year is, does the Forza Horizon 5 kind of blew things out of the water last year, right? In terms of it being on PlayStation 5, it got the best financial performance that it ever received. It was also kind of very funny to me that, the only part of the conversation was, oh, look, it sold so amazingly well on PS5. It's funny that, the other part of the conversation wasn't like, yeah, like way better numbers than it ever did on Xbox. So um, I'm very curious to see what the sustainability is of that for other Xbox titles going to PlayStation. Um, whether or not there was novelty in those Xbox games arriving on PlayStation for the first time. Whether or not Forza Horizon is an anomaly because that IP plays a certain way on PlayStation. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how, things like Avowed and other things going over to PlayStation do. Particularly, the Outer Worlds 2, started off as a multi-platform title. It was announced, I think, before the acquisition. They even acquired Obsidian. So, the Outer Worlds 2 showing up, still maybe feels to a lot of people even, like just another third-party publisher game. So it'll be interesting to see these properties that are more tightly coupled to the notion of Xbox as a brand, like Avowed, which definitely happened entirely under their watch, and to see how they financially perform or commercially perform on PlayStation. So my point being, the price point doesn't seem unusual to me because I wonder if Xbox is thinking that also and thinking, hey, maybe when we port a game to PlayStation and it's going over there late and it's outside this window, as Xbox fans claim, things don't do well when they finally get to Xbox because they didn't come over here first, so we're not going to buy them when they show up late, which is a ludicrous rationale to have. But if that is the case, I wonder if Xbox is saying, maybe when we send these things over, we should send them over, at a lower price point than as $70 games.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine, especially too, when the game it's going to launch February of this year, and so it's about that's a year, almost a year after it released on Xbox, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. Speaking of Xbox, Xbox Developer Direct is coming up. It's going to air Thursday, January 22nd. We're going to get updates on the new Forza Horizon game and Fable. Forza Horizon 6, as a matter of fact. There's rumors of a smaller game being revealed at this Developer Direct.
Well, it's Fable, Forza, and this whatever Beast of whatever game that's from a third-party studio, but published by Xbox,
Beast,
I think.
yeah, I forgot Beast of Reincarnation. Yeah, it's a action RPG from Pokemon developer Game Freak. Yeah, so I'm actually I'm not big into Forza Horizon anymore, but I am excited for Fable. Getting an update on Fable. Hopefully, I'd like to see a release date for Fable. Hopefully, this game comes out this year, 2026. Yeah, are you interested in Fable Lodge, or are you just? I know you like the Forza games, so are you looking
No,
forward
I'm
to?
not a no, I'm
No,
not. No, I'm not a Fable fan, and I'm
yeah,
not
and
like overly like wrapped around the axle about keeping track of this game. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm just not a person who's gonna go in
yeah.
on a 40-hour plus RPG.
Oh, you know I
I
will.
mean, yeah.
You know I will. What about Forza Horizon 6?
I'm interested in it. It's. I mean, I'm likely have turned a corner where I'm just not gonna, dedicate an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours to watch these showcases. These console showcases. I'm probably more likely just gonna, go to a roll up the next day and watch the individual trailers that I'm interested in. Forza Horizon is definitely a title I'm interested in, but given that I'm not entirely like super clear on what's going to happen with the game, given like the change in production pipeline and workflow that they're going through now, with a significant reduction in Turn 10 Studios, the fact that theoretically the engine they're building this on is from a game that did is not well received critically. Um, I'm not investing a lot of myself in like you know being gaga over it. I'll keep an eye on it and watch the trailer, but other than that, I pretty much need to see how it lands in November or whenever it comes out. And I'll assess, whether or not it's a good game, once it's been tested and released.
Yeah, I can't say I'm interested. Like I said, I'm not really into the Forza games anymore. So yeah, I mean, obviously it's pillar franchise for Xbox, Microsoft. It'd be cool to see what they're cooking, but not something I'm necessarily looking forward to. Fable is what I really want to see. Fable's one of those. If you remember Project Ego, Peter Molyneux talking about Project Ego back in the original Xbox days, and I was really hyped for that. Listening to Peter the car salesman, sell me on the dream of a Project Ego and all the things you could do, and Fable released. I don't think it quite lived up to Peter's hype, but still, I thought it was a good, great new entry to for the Xbox at the time, new franchise. So, but this brings me to this question, Logic. Every January 2026, right? Every year, this is the year of Xbox. I saw somebody post something the other day. An influencer said, "Can you imagine Halo, Gears E Day, and Fable release 2026? This would be the best Xbox year ever in its 25-year history." I'm like, whoa, let's pump the brakes here. 2007. 2007, at least in my opinion, is probably one of the best years of for the best year for exclusives on the Xbox 360. But yeah, every year we have this conversation. Every year it's this is going to be Xbox's year, and and I get the excitement. Like they definitely, like we talked about, they've purchased a lot of studios. With that the amount of studios they have that can crank out content. Um, I certainly understand the excitement. Um, I just don't. I guess where I sit, Logic is like let's just let them cook. Let's not place these lofty expectations. You know, this is going to be the best year of Xbox. You know, let's let the studios cook and see what they release.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that topic is, like you said, it's every year. Um, and I'm kind of like, well, why? Um, but I also, again, following the thread of the logic, right? Well, if every year since 2013, right, since Phil Spencer came to power, 2014 or whatever, is like this is the year, this is the year, this is the year. Does that mean every year where it has not come to fruition meant that year was actually the year of PlayStation or the year of Nintendo? That seems to
It's
be
a
not
great
be a thing.
no.
And this goes hand in hand with one of the things that I listened to over the break was the Full Nerds kind of wrap up thing. And one thing they do every year is they do their predictions, and so they take all the predictions that they made in their prediction show, and if your prediction was wrong, then each of them has to pick some type of punishment. Um, and the punishments are goofy, and you can definitely argue that's weird that would be noted as a punishment. But the point is I thought what was super interesting was when they went over the history of why they do that this year. And I've talked to you before about the gaming journalists that I have the greatest and utmost respect for, or are the guys that I grew up reading, in the 2000s. PC Gamer and Maximum PC, and one of those was the great Gordon Maung, who unfortunately passed away last year or maybe the year before. And one of the reasons, and he was kind of this old school guy who came up during that age, and then like you could really tell he was really mentoring and coaching this crew of kind of new PC gaming journalists at PC World. And one of the things they brought up is like the reason we do this is because Gordon would insist that we do this because he is bothered by the fact that content creators don't hold themselves accountable. And I was kind of really amazed because what they recited back was actually very similar to the thing that I say, which is that you have all these content creators who run around and talk about I called it. but they keep no scorecards about all the things that they get wrong. And it's also super weird to me when, you know, I've seen Seeds go through this, and Moore's Law is Dead goes through a lot of this. And I see all these people keeping scorecards of like, oh, well, they got this wrong, they got that wrong, they've got a less than a 50%. You know, Seeds gets one thing wrong, and people say, well, you're not reliable. I'm like, well, first of all, part of the problem is your guys' own FOMO, right, and this thirst for the leak market. But the other thing is that you guys hold these content creators accountable, but you don't hold these other content creators accountable. And I'm like, it's just kind of disgusting to me, like that whole behavioral set of like, I called it very often, which is not what they actually called. You know, the people who run around with like the, you know, Mr. 95% right all the time, you know, labels on their podcasts, and I'm like, show me a scorecard. Like, because I've heard you say things quite often that you've gotten wrong. And again, there's no accountability. So I kind of really appreciate that from that full nerd, you know, podcast crew, and wish that we would see more content creators, you know, do that.
Accountability, you say? That word doesn't exist in the content creator space, Logic.
No, and I know a lot of people hate me because I don't abide by this code of like things you're not supposed to talk about and things you're not supposed to say about content creators. Apparently I missed that training session sometime in 2022 where I got wrapped into this whole Twitter YouTube circuit.
Oh, I missed that. Yeah, I've yeah, you know, I don't. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's what I was saying. Like I saw Paris say, you know, this could be the biggest year of Xbox, you know, in its 25-year history. I'm like, what? Like, why are we doing that? Like, why are we setting those expectations? I also disagree too. Like, it's like historically speaking, like I go back to 2007, I look at some of the exclusive games that released on the 360, and I look at those games like, you know, it was Halo 3, Mass Effect. I mean, think about the influential impact of Mass Effect to the industry, right? And it was exclusive. Mass Effect launches an exclusive title on the 360, right? Then I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Portal had launched as part of the Orange Box that year. And I think that, I don't know if that was exclusive to the 360. I think it may have been. I have to look that up. And then obviously Crackdown. Gears had launched late 2006. But again, you know, Geometry Wars, another release. So I mean, like it had all these. There's all these games that released in 2007. Project Gotham Racing 3. I mean, it launched late 2006, but still it like had that carryover effect. BioShock. I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like some of that self-serving. You start making those proclamations of, oh yeah, this is gonna be the best year ever. It's like, okay, but maybe not.
But what does it mean? Like, again, you know,
I don't know what it means.
So,
I mean, like, are we comparing? I mean, there's no comparison. Like, oh, in comparison to this year, like that's why I brought up 2007. Actually, I replied, I quote tweeted that tweet by Terrace. I was like, by Paris, I said, oh yeah, 2007 is hold my beer.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Slow-Mo always gives me flack for this notion that, you know, I'm the only person he hears, you know, routinely use the term rubric. I'm like, what's the rubric for like what is the greatest year ever? Like, is it marked by the games that are releasing? I'm a hardware guy. Like, the greatest year ever to me is typically when I get new hardware. So, like, absent of that, I don't know where anything would break on my radar as like the greatest year ever. So, you know, I don't know, the greatest year of content. You know, maybe that's an argument.
Well, that was part of the argument. I think he brought up like, hey, if Halo 3, Fable, Gears E-Day, if those launch 2026, that would constitute, you know, 2026 being the biggest year for Xbox in its 25-year history. I just don't agree with that. I look at 2007. I'm like, I think 2007.
Well, and you said Fable, Halo, and Gears.
Yeah, Gears E-Day.
Look, I don't know.
We don't even know if Gears E-Day is going to be good. Like that's the other thing.
Fable. Look,
Fable.
In my eyes, being a guy who was a dude bro down with the whole Americanism of the Xbox brand, and loved like the heyday of Xbox. Halo is not the franchise that it used to be. Gears of War is not the franchise it used to be. Gears of War maybe arguably was kind of you and I have talked about this a little. It is maybe kind of arguably like a thing of its time. That is maybe kind of past, like in the whole notion of like the roadie run and big oversized, you know, tank top bodybuilder types, right? As your character, like I don't
Marcus Phoenix running all the time. Oh,
and the weapon set and kind of
yeah,
the limited combat mechanic. Like I don't know if that's where like it's at from a design perspective. It's certainly nostalgic and it certainly will harken back. But I don't necessarily know if those are the two games to kind of pierce the veil and break the landscape. Fable has an opportunity to break out and be something where Playground kind of brings its own moxie to that in their own quirky set of humor. And if they kind of pull I don't know, I'll just say their own brand of humor into it, that it has a chance to break out and be something different. But that's one title. So the greatest year of all time, or like the best year for Xbox, would have been a year where maybe for me, we would have seen Perfect Dark come back, but unfortunately, we're not going to see that now.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, and also, again, are we having a platform conversation or are we having a publisher conversation? If those games get announced and are going over to PlayStation shortly on the heels of their Xbox release, then what are we talking about when we say the greatest year ever?
I mean, can we compare it? If these games are releasing day and date on PlayStation, I mean, is the conversation, is it fair to compare it historically to Xbox when it's now more of a publisher? I don't know. Never mind. I'm not going to say that because I don't want to.
Well, I think like
because I don't want to take away from the games that they're publishing, right? Like I don't like Xbox is still a platform, but yeah, it's not traditional.
Is it? I don't know that it is, and I think that's part of the thing. And where I'm trying to level set.
I think it is logic in the sense of like they still have hardware, they still have Game Pass, right? Like it's still a platform, right? It's evolved. It's not what it used to be. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't think of it as a platform. Like, look, like here's the thing, and I was noodling on this before we went live. Like, you need hardware, right, to play games on. Period. Whether it's your hardware or somebody else's hardware, you need hardware. So this whole marketing campaign of like, you don't need an Xbox. You need something to play Xbox video games on. Now, is that your phone? Or is that your PlayStation? Or is that your Nintendo? Is that your PC? It could be in it, your TV, your Hisense, your TCL, right? But every node, right, that gets further from the flagpole, your brand and your identity as a platform gets diluted. So unless you're at the central core of the MCP, I don't really like recognize you as having a tentpole stake down on being a platform. The platform is the thing that has a market share of 30 million users. Everything else beyond that is a dilution of any notion of a platform. So again, when we say the greatest year on Xbox ever, like I don't think that doesn't seem to be a platform statement.
Mm-hmm. You look at that more as a publisher statement.
Yeah, and then again, either way, right? Then my point is, okay, well, why don't we level set fandoms, right, and settle on like what is the difference here in the conversation? Because I mean, maybe they do. I haven't been around it. Is there a lot of flag waving about like the greatest, like next year will be the year of PlayStation, or next year will be the year of Nintendo, or next year will be the year of PC? I seem to not hear that rhetoric anywhere else. Maybe I think the closest thing I've gotten to it is I felt like during the closeout year of the PlayStation 4, when we got Ghost of Tsushima and Tilu 2, that there was kind of some sentiment around that.
Like, yeah, it kind of was. Yeah, that might be the closest.
Yeah, and that's not unusual for the closeout year of
and I would say the launch of the Nintendo Switch too, not the Nintendo Switch 2, but also the Nintendo Switch, the first one.
Yeah, I don't. Did we call it the year of Nintendo though? I don't. I don't feel like this time.
I mean, I don't know if I don't know if we called it the year of Nintendo as much as we said this might be one of the best Nintendo launches. But yeah, I don't think we called it like the year of Nintendo. I think you're right. I think probably the closest logic was was that year the towards the latter part of the PlayStation 4 generation.
I would actually say I felt I felt the one time we've said it and the one time it's been valid was when we said that 2005 to 2006 year of the Xbox 360 was the year of 360, and I felt that that was actually relevant and pertinent because it wasn't. It was the launch, it was the new hardware, but also it was the rise of Xbox Live, and it was the way that you had such a large part of the gaming community kind of centrifying, right, and really anchoring itself around the notion of that online community and the way Xbox Live operated, and the way it was kind of this invasive part of like our lives. Um, but beyond that, like I again I go back to I feel like these aren't things that we say about PlayStation or Nintendo ever. I think these are things we never say about PC ever. And I think that there's like from a publisher perspective, we never say this is the year of EA, this is the year of Rockstar, this is the year of Activision. Um, and so it just seems way out of sync with the sentiments of other fandoms.
No, it definitely does. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen like literally every year. This is the year of Xbox. Xbox is back this year. It's like, and then into that, I would say let's just let these studios cook. Let's not put these lofty expectations.
Yeah, it's an interesting because I've been so recently like had some differences of opinion
Yeah.
about Obsidian in the Outer Worlds too, and for me, Obsidian is one of my top favorite studios of all time. Um, and I found myself when I saw some of these conversations going on about the Outer Worlds 2 really kind of sliding in this direction of it was maybe last year. There was an episode of Kind of Funny Games, and Snowbike Mike was like giving some pushback to Greg Miller, and I mean I think maybe Tim Geddes, but his notion that like, hey, why do we have to do this every time an Xbox game comes out? Like, why every time an Xbox game comes out is it the conversation is what has it done for the platform, right? Whether or not it's moved the needle, and I found myself sliding in that direction a little bit. The Outer Worlds 2, like Obsidian is a studio. They've never been branded as Bethesda. They've never been branded as like Blizzard. They've never carried the moniker of like this greatest studio of all time, right? They make content that is in a certain band, and their shtick is that it's consistent, and it comes in good to above average, and that is their marquee. And they're not interested in becoming a Hollywood studio. They're not interested in becoming rock stars, right? Blah 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 blah. And so I was a little bothered because I definitely feel like some of the sentiment around the Outer Worlds 2 and some other Obsidian games. And I'm not saying like Grounded does not interest me one iota. Pentiment doesn't interest me one iota. So there are definitely games that they've done that I'm like, whatever. But I do feel like some of the stink that gets pointed in the direction of Obsidian is because of the fact that they are an Xbox studio. And so I kind of felt myself sliding a little bit towards that Snowbike Mike sentiment of like, hey, why is it like when these games come out from Xbox, we can't just talk about the game, South of Midnight, Avowed? Why is it always about, whether or not it's done anything for platform? But the one thing that holds me back a little bit from getting full over tilted right in that direction is that it's not always the Xbox haters who do it. It is very often the Xbox fandom themselves because they, as you said, they prop these games up, right? And exhort them as being more than they are. That's where we got with Starfield being the game of the generation and like some of these preposterous things that were made about it. This is why people just refuse to acknowledge that Forza Motorsport is not a well critically received game. The problem is because of things like this, because we don't just talk about the games, because we talk about these games make Xbox the greatest year ever. These games being available on Game Pass, right, is the greatest thing in the world. Me being able to play these games on like 5 different screens, right, is the thing that makes the game great. I'm like, no, the things that make the game great, because for a lot of people, you need to acknowledge that doesn't matter.
Yeah, that
right?
doesn't matter. Yeah.
What matters and what we should be talking about, and this is where I have the umbrage with the people who said, well then, we can start talking about the games and stop talking about the platforms. I'm like, no, it's you guys who don't just talk about the games. It's you guys who are constantly about business models. It's you guys who are all constantly on about the future of gaming. It's you guys who are constantly on about kids only want to play on phones and tablets. It's you guys who are constantly this doom and gloom that, hold your consoles tight. There's no growth, right? And then we look at the Newzoo report and we see that the market is expected to be up 4% this year. It's like, just talk about the games, let the games live on their own, let people make their own decisions about, in aggregate, how they feel about the platform or the publisher, and stop trying to pander, right, and tilt public sentiment in that direction, and just, talk about the games and let that speak for itself.
Yeah, no, I agree 110% Logic, I'll never understand that every year. No, Gaming Ledger, I'm not signing up for that credit card. But I have the sick I have a sicking feeling that's where this is going, by the way. And it'll be promoted as the big banks are ripping you off. Get this card, 10%, cap, interest rate cap. So
we should talk a little bit about, you mentioned this all started with the mention of the developer direct. We should talk about what the pattern of behavior, what the historical pattern of behavior has been from Microsoft/Xbox, and what we may have some logical fear may also unfold this month.
I'm sorry, Logic. What did you say about fear? I missed that part.
So the pattern of behavior for the last few years with Xbox has been, they do a developer direct, they do a summer showcase.
Yep.
There's lots of rah-rahing, lots of cheerleading.
And then there's delays.
Well, within 1 to 2 weeks of then, there's a mass layoff impacting the game.
Oh, that yes. Well, I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, there's that. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I want to first at least brief it out, decoupled from the notion of the rumor, right? Because there is objective evidence that this has been what's going on, and an objective reason to be concerned that it's going to happen again. Because these layoffs tend to occur in the walk up to earnings reports, and that is so they can go in, and not just Microsoft, but everyone, right? This is a Wall Street publicly traded company pattern of behavior that layoffs tend to occur leading up to earnings reports, so that those costs associated with that human capital can then be discounted, right, and used to pad their margins and appear, on the upside, right, going into Wall Street. And so again, like, from a gaming perspective, your pattern of events and sequence of events has been showcase/developer direct, huge layoffs, earnings reports. There's a valid concern that that's unfortunately what we're going to see again this year. Earnings reports from Microsoft are predicted to be between January 28th and February 4th. So let's just all keep in mind and keep our fingers crossed, right? And have prayers that, like, while we're watching this developer direct unfold and we're getting lathered up and pumped up for these games, that, that pattern of behavior isn't going to be followed suit, right? This time in the month of January, and that you're going to have developers showing their wares who were then shortly laid off thereafter.
Well, there is that rumor, right? That there could be 10,000 layoffs, additional layoffs. That have to, let me see if I can pull this article up again. One sec here. Looks like Frank Shaw, Chief Communications Officer at Microsoft, responded to posts about rumors saying that they were 100% made out speculative wrong. But this is a reply to Jez Corden's Xbox post about Xbox related layoffs. So I don't think he is. I don't think Frank Shaw is denied anything Microsoft related, because part of that rumor had said that. Hold on a sec here, Logic. Pull this article up. Here we go. Communications lead Frank Shaw commented on the original rumor as being 100% made up, speculative, wrong. Here's hoping there'll be no layoffs, of course. Original story. New rumor suggests Microsoft is preparing to use its layoff hacks once again for the fourth consecutive January, cutting between 11 and 22,000 jobs across various divisions, including Xbox, because of the rising cost of AI investment. The figures were confirmed. It would be the biggest layoff round yet. So again, I mean, this is rumor, but to your point, Logic, there has been. I mean, look, we go back to 2023. There was layoffs. 2024 layoffs. 2025 layoffs. All these happening. The month of January, right? Right before they release their financials. I think those are coming out in February of this year. So yeah, I mean, there is a pattern there. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see if these layoffs do in fact happen. But yeah, if they do 10,000 again, that would be a lot.
Yeah, and I'm not. I mean, I'm personally not so much pinned to the notion of like how big it's going to be. It's just the unfortunate cycle of you step up, your studio shows off a game, right, and then you could be the person who's negatively impacted by these actions.
Yeah, well, I mean, Frank Shaw. Let's see. Let's pull up this. Hold on a sec here. There we go. You see Jess Corden false on the Xbox side, at least. Frank Shaw saying 100% made up, speculative, wrong. So that maybe applies to Xbox only, but it doesn't mean there may not be.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't put any stock in statements that we talk about accuracy and track records. That's not a dynamic that inspires me to confidence or belief.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I don't disagree, but I'm hoping there's not additional layoffs. So, because like I said, we have seen that the last 3 years from Microsoft after these events, and towards the latter part of January, third week of January. So we'll just have to wait and see. Start reading the chat here. Big shout out to everyone in the live chat. Please do me a favor. Hit that like button if you haven't done so already. Chat's been great this evening. Thank you, everyone. All right, Logic. That's all I got for topics, unless there's anything else you'd like to discuss.
No, I think that's a full slate.
Yeah, full slate. Yeah. I'm probably gonna go back and play some Red Dead Redemption 2 on the PC. Like I tell you, man, it is literally a generational leap from Red Dead Redemption 1, Red Dead Redemption 2. It's definitely the better game. And I don't say that just because of the visuals, but I think the writing's better. How they introduce different cinematic, like cutscenes as you're traversing. Yeah, it's just a better game, I think, overall. But it's gonna be interesting to see what GTA 6 looks like. All right. Well, that's all we have for tonight's show. Again, I want to thank everyone for coming by, hanging out with us. As I mentioned, we had to reschedule Wednesday's show. Had a scheduling conflict, but we will be back Wednesday. I promise Wednesday. I shouldn't say I promise because I need to look at my my apps on my phone to see what sporting events or commitments we might have. Uh, but we should be back next Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So Son of Asgard says Red Dead Redemption 2 is unmatched. But yeah, we should be back next Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern time, our regular scheduled time. So Logic, thank you again. I don't know if you want to be found, but if you do, let me know where they can find you.
If you do want to find me, keep a lookout for my gaming industry solo cast called Gaming Outside the Algorithm, which we'll post periodically on the Rounding Off Infinity channel on YouTube. Should be a new episode going up on Sunday.
Oh, awesome. Okay. I definitely look forward to that. And if you want to give me a follow, I'm on X, BRAP_podcast. You can find me there. I'm kind of in and out. Sometimes I'm there more often than not. I don't know. Sometimes I'm not. But anyhow, that's where you can find me here Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So, but everyone, enjoy the weekend. Get some gaming in. Have fun doing so, because that's ultimately what it's all about. And we'll catch you next week on Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern time. See you then.